This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast that interviews police officers, active and retired, about their most intense, humorous, and bizarre moments on the job. I said that backwards than what I usually do, but I don't have my piece of paper I usually read. I flew home, guys, from shift. I was working. I got here as quick as I could to interview this guest. I'm super excited to have him. I felt bad that he had to wait a little bit, but it's, you know how it is with police work. Sometimes you get held up and things don't go as planned. I can tell you one thing, one idea for the new police reform ideas that are floating around, more time off and more money. I think that would change the mental state of a lot of people. That would be great. We'll throw that out to the taxpayers, see what they think. Because as of right now, I work about right around 60 hours a week to support a family and do what I need to do, keep the bills paid. So it's kind of a lot of hours, especially when some situations you deal with as a police officer can be pretty serious. So just a thought, if there's any lawmakers out there that want to, bump up our pay, make a federal bill for that, I'd be for it. I'd vote for that. Let me get to our guest. Our guest's name is James Meeks. I don't usually do this, but this guy's got such a long career and he's involved in so much stuff. I'm going to read his bio before I bring him on. So Jimmy served as a police officer in Shawnee, Oklahoma from 1980 to 1985. He began work with the Hearst, Texas Police Department in December 1985, then retired in 2015. Obviously, he's a retired police officer now. He's served 35 years in law enforcement. He's also been a minister for 47 years, which amen to that. I love that. That's so cool. As an officer, he served as a hostage negotiator, field training officer, school resource officer, detective supervisor, and crime prevention officer. And he's also been certified in crime prevention specialist. So he's the founder of Sheepdog Seminars, a co-venture with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. You probably remember Lieutenant Colonel Grossman from that famous sheepdog speech that he gave that really kind of gained some traction in the law enforcement world. And the two of them together have conducted over 100 seminars together. Jimmy and his wife of 43 years, Julie, were married at the First Baptist Church of Daingerfield, Texas, the site of the June 22nd, 1980 massacre that killed 5 and injured 10. He's also a production assistant in the award-winning docudrama Faith Under Fire, based on the tragedy at that church. He currently leads the Cornelius Project, also called Blue Life Support, where they do outreach to police officers and generally motivate them and provide services for them. So without further ado, let me bring on my man, waiting in the green room, Jimmy Meeks. Sir!
Hey, it's a privilege to be on, Steve. Listening to my bio, I had no idea I was such an impressive guy.
You are impressive, my man. Jeez.
Yeah, right.
I said,
do you see my nose growing?
I was starting to run late for this podcast, and at the same time, I checked my email and saw this guy's bio and said, geez, I'm really, I'm standing him up. He's got all this experience and wealth of knowledge.
No, I'm glad to be on. I'm retired. I don't have to be at work, and I sure don't do 60 hours a week, and so, man, I'm on your time, brother. It's a privilege to be here on this podcast. I love doing this. Want to help the officers in any way we can.
Well, thank you so much for that. I as a family, we confessed Christ about, I think, 3 years ago now. We were raised Catholic, and then we've come back into the faith and as Protestant, and it completely changed our lives. And I know it sounds a cliche when you tell people that, or if you try to, tell someone the gospel, but when we were called back to Christ, we really saw the power of the gospel firsthand and what it meant, and we'd never seen that before as an entire family. So when I read that you've been a minister for all those years, geez, I love that. It's so great, especially dovetailing that with what you're doing now.
Well, Steve, you should tell your audience you haven't shared any of this with me, so I'm getting teary-eyed here. I wasn't ready for you to come on preaching. I'm waiting for you to ask for an offering now. I don't know where you're going with that, but anyway, praise the Lord. I'm seeing that all over the country. I was at Minneapolis PD about 90 days ago, talking to one of the officers there at Minneapolis, where all this trouble is going on. You in the country know about that. The whole world knows about that. And a stressed out, bummed out, burned out, PTSD-stricken police officer told me what you just told me. He said, Jimmy, I will tell you this, all this trouble in Minneapolis has brought me back to my faith in Jesus. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I shared the gospel there with several of the police officers. I drove around the country is what I did. I went to, got in the car and drove 6,000 miles, Chicago PD, St. Louis, Kenosha, Minneapolis, Portland, speaking at roll calls and reaching out to the officers. And I don't preach at them. What we want to be is a source of encouragement because of everything that's going on. And it's just, I never served in an atmosphere or an environment like they're serving in today. This is completely different than anything I knew in my 3.5 decades.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously you had it. Seems like you're a teacher at heart, or a communicator. Anyways, you're a minister, and you're not. It's not foreign to you speaking to people about matters of the heart. And how did you get into doing this?
Or you asked me how I got into police work?
No, how'd you get into like speaking to officers to help them?
Oh, I just I became a police officer in 1980, and toward the end of my 5 years in Oklahoma, I began to think, there's a ministry in this. I had to reconcile first. Can you reconcile faith with police work? I studied, and within a few days, I wondered, how did I ever even ask that question? They fit like hand in glove. I mean, there's a Bible verse that says, and I quote from the Living Bible, the police officer is sent by God. I mean, how many people could say that? Can the Walmart greeter say that, or the checker at Kroger? I mean, which is, I'm all for that. Any job can be honorable. But we have a divine, ordained, created job. So I thought, well, I'd already been a minister for about 7 years. I grew up in Arkansas, down the road from a little guy named Bill Clinton. You might have heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
And down near Hope, Arkansas, where Mike Huckabee is also from. We like to throw that in if we have to say that Clinton was also
Clinton might need a little preaching at.
Yeah. Maybe we ought to hold off on that. I want to live after this interview, okay? But I'd been a minister for years. I did not intend to stay in police work 35 years. I figured I was going to college in Oklahoma at Oklahoma Baptist University, and then I moved to Texas to go to seminary, which I never got around to going to because I stayed in police work. But I just combined the two, and then in the late 80s, I started a newspaper that we distributed around the nation called Cop and Cross. And then over the next 10 years, I had two or three different radio shows I did. And from time to time, we would single out police departments that were going through a hard time. In the early 90s, Los Angeles was going through a rough time with Rodney King ordeal. And then an incident occurred in Detroit. So we would go to these police departments and pass out our newspapers. And so I just did that for about 10 years. And then I backed off for a while I was a pastor of a church and a cop, still here in the Fort Worth area. And then I just said, we've got to go after the police again. My wife is the senior chaplain for the police department that I retired from 5 years ago. So we're just, we created this website, the Cornelius Project, or bluelifesupport.com. There's all kinds of shortcuts to it, bluelife.support. And we're just trying to help the officers get better, just giving them hope, not only just giving them the gospel, but just, 5 or 6 things that this will really help you. There's 5 or 6 things that cops really need to get good at that could, decrease some of this turmoil that we're seeing in the nation and what have you. So I'm back. I've kind of made a full circle, and now we're just, we run a daily podcast, Blue Life Support podcast, and we do mission trips, and we're going to start these seminars here as soon as COVID blows down a little bit. We have an incredible team. We have 6 officers who've been shot on the team, 6 who've had to shoot and kill. We have 3 Medal of Valor recipients, and even Taya Kyle is on our team, the wife of Chris Kyle from American Sniper.
Wow.
So we have a really interesting team. We want to take them around the nation and encourage the police. I know a lot of them are down, and a lot of them are down, Steve, because they don't know the truth. I mean, 75% of the American public is in your corner. 3 out of 4 Americans support the police.
Yeah, you're not going to get the truth on the nightly news.
No, 3 out of... Now, the majority of those 75%, they won't reform. And I understand that. We do need to... the police have got to have enough humility to say, hey, what do we need to do that would make us better? But at the same time, the police are not out killing thousands of people and, or tons of unarmed people. That's just not true. So
yeah,
you
it
got to
gets so
take the time
twisted.
to dig into it.
It gets so twisted. Like you see,
it gets so twisted.
They have all these great reform ideas they come up with, and they go like, "Oh, chokeholds should be illegal," and all this. These are already illegal. Like a lot of the stuff they come up with for reform is already policy in most places.
Yeah, crime should be illegal, and it's last time I checked, it was. So there needs to be some maybe criminal or justice reform needs to start with criminals.
Yeah.
I didn't go out picking fights. I got called to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Most police don't go out picking fights, but there does need to be a lot of change. There's 17,000 police departments out there, 787,000 cops. I've watched hundreds of videos, and it's obviously that we can do better. We got to get better at learning how to calm people down, but most cops are doing that. I worked for a very professional police department that everybody wanted to work at. Hearst, Texas, on the north side of Fort Worth. People come from everywhere. We've hired Chicago cops, Arizona cops, Dallas cops. A great department. So, we didn't go through a lot of that. We just didn't. We didn't instigate a lot of things that got us in trouble, which I'm not saying other departments have, but for the most part, we were pretty calm and highly trained. All the guys had college degrees and what have you, and masters and everything else. So I was fortunate to work at a good department. Yeah,
you're right. I mean, police work like any good organization, company, public or private. You have to evolve. As things change, you have to adapt. And, a lot of times in government, things are a little bit slower to adapt that way. I just interviewed a guy that his episode's not out yet, but he has like a public relations app he developed for the police departments where they'll send you follow-up text after a case. Like, here's your case number. This was the officer you spoke to. Do you have any suggestions, or would you like to speak with them? This is how you get in contact.
Yeah.
Just basic stuff that private companies have been doing for 2 decades that the police, maybe if they treated it more like a service like that, could help our brand, could really kind of help us out. And I just love your website. I went on there and the Cornelius Project, I was like, why is that the name? But it sounded familiar to me because I read the, scriptures and stuff. And right away I knew like, oh, this is a centurion that, dreamt about Peter, and then Peter went over and, he was the first he was the first Christian, really first converted.
Well, here's the interesting thing, Steve. He's the first non-Jewish person to
That's what it
Christian.
is. Yes, that's what it was.
Now, here's what's really interesting. I've known that. My degree is in religion, and my postgraduate work is in ministry, and I'm pushing 50 years in the ministry. I don't know how I missed this. Cornelius is the first non-Jewish convert. You're either Jew or Gentile. That's who you are. It doesn't matter what color you are, male or female.
That's what I was trying to say.
You're a Jewish person, or you're not Jewish, which makes you Gentile. So Cornelius is the first Gentile convert to the Christian faith. Cornelius was a police officer. He was the equivalent of a captain over patrol.
That's right.
He was an exercise fanatic. He was a great leader. I've studied the lives of centurions. He had 100 soldiers under him. But here's what's interesting. When God decides to go outside the Jewish race and start saving people that are not Jewish, he says, let's start with the police. And that
never thought about it like that, Jimmy.
Neither did I, brother. Until June of 2016, I'm sitting in an auditorium in Colorado with Colonel Grossman doing a seminar. He brings up Cornelius, and it hits me like a lightning bolt. Whoa, wait a minute. And the qualities of his life, it says he was devout and he feared God. He had integrity. That's relevant to police work. He had a family life that was intact. It says his whole family was, and that's such a need. Now, I was at a police department. I won't say where. I'll say it to you off the air. Just a few days ago, less than a week ago, I was at the police department in Texas where a police officer took his life. We've had 32 police officers take their lives so far this year, active and retired, 32. I was at this department, and they said, Jimmy, he took his life because of domestic problems. And he said, they told me, this is a quote, he said, the officer lived and died by the job. That's one of the biggest mistakes you can make if you're a police officer, is to live and die by the job. You don't let it get in your blood. It's a job.
Yep.
It's not your life. That's a whole other conversation. But he lived and died by the job, and he was arguing with his wife all the time. They were trying to get back together. He got into an argument. He went home, and he took his life, shot himself, and that breaks my heart. I had a friend of mine who was a police officer in Oklahoma who did that. So the family life is creating a lot of stress. Most of the stress in the life of the cop doesn't come from the stuff on the street. I had a Portland officer tell me the other day when I was in Portland, he said, man, this stuff don't bother me. It just hits the body. It don't get inside. It's the stuff at home that gets a lot of officers. And the third thing we know about Cornelius is that he was charitable to the Jews. Now, he's a Roman. He's charitable to the Jews, as Scripture says, and Jews and Romans did not get along, so there would have been a
Right.
racial divide. So he had dealt with the issue of racism. And then it says, lastly, he was prayerful, which is just another way of saying he walked with God. So I got a book coming out this week. I'm not selling it. I'm putting it on the internet free, but it's called How to Walk with God and Wear a Badge. And it's very easy to do that. I mean, God is so pro-police. So that's where the Cornelius Project comes from.
Beautiful. I love it. Hey, and give me the links. They'll be all in the show notes, and I'll put them on the website and everything for you. Of course.
Bet. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Of course. Jimmy, let's delve into your police career a little bit. Can you tell us about the first call you would consider to be the first hot call you responded to, the first time?
Oh, I remember, as if it happened yesterday. I thought about this 10,000 times. I got hired in October of 1980. I didn't go to the police academy until 2 months later, January of 1981, when they had it scheduled. So after a week of hanging around the police department, they took us to Oklahoma City and got our uniforms, and we're in a police car. A week later with our FTOs, and I rode with an FTO for 8 weeks prior to the academy. Then I got out of the academy and trained 3 weeks and then got cut loose, which was probably too early. I was 22 years old, didn't know what I was doing. I mean, my gun didn't even fit my holster. And I'm a college kid, and I think I made $5.50 an hour. But Steve, I remember, I've thought about this 10,000 times. My first day on the job with my FTO, his name was Mike. He was a great cop. We get in the police car, and we hit the street at 3 o'clock, the old evening shift, 3 to 11. And by 3:30, we had a hot call to assistant officer in another district, a man with a knife. And Mike put the pedal to the metal. I mean, he must have driven 60, 70 miles an hour down to the middle of town to get over there to back up Ron, the other officer. Ron was like 6'4",
Sure.
230 pounds, and I remember thinking, all right, I'm going to a knife call, and there's a chance we may not survive this drive the way he's driving. And I remember thinking, I'm going to die the first day. I'll have the shortest career in the history of police work. And we get there. And Ron is standing in front of this old guy. Looks kind of, I don't know, looks like a homeless guy. He's not. He lived there on the street. But Ron is standing there holding the knife. He had taken the knife from him. And I don't know if you're going to edit this or not, but I remember Ron looking at him and saying, now, Larry, if I come back out here, I'm going to take this knife and shove it up your you-know-what. And he used another word, starts with an A.
Sure.
And I was startled. I was not ready. And this was my introduction to police work. This big old cop looking down at this little homeless-looking guy saying, I don't think this is anatomically possible, but I'm going to do this with this knife.
Oh, geez.
And I remember getting in the car after that, and I'm kind of dazed, thinking, wow, I've been on the streets for 45 minutes. And a man with a knife call, he talks to him like that. And I looked at my FTO and said, Mike, can we talk to the public like that? Is that acceptable? He goes, no, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Of course, there were no video cameras or microphones back then.
That's a good FTO.
I can still see Ron standing in there just south of Farrell Street. I can standing there with that knife, waving it in his face, telling him what he's going to do if he has to come back out. And what I remember next, though, and I know we don't want to go through everything, was what happened 3 hours later. Stephen, this was just funny to me, but Mike looked at me at 7 o'clock and said, it's time to eat, rookie. I said, okay, let's eat. And I immediately got nervous because I never had money on me. I never have money to this day, 40 years later. I would have money on me if I had money. But I had no money. I had no ATM card. I don't even know that they were invented yet. But I remember Mike saying, let's go eat. I got real nervous because I had no money. And he took me to McDonald's, and we're standing in line, and I thought, I'm so hungry, but I'm going to order water. It's free, and I'll tell him I'm not hungry. Finally, there was one person in front of us. We were about to put our order in when I looked at Mike and said, Mike, I'm so embarrassed. I don't have $1 on me. And he looked at me and smiled and said, I don't either, boy. This is McDonald's. The police eat free. And I said, what? And that was about 60,000 Big Macs ago. I mean, if I ever get a bill from those guys, I'm going to need to come back on your show and beg for money. That was the first of the thousands of milkshakes and fries and apple pies with ice cream for a dessert and a Big Mac. And ate free there for the next 35 years. So I hope they don't go retro on me and send me a bill. But those two things, I mean, by 11 o'clock, I was psyched. 22-year-old kid with a gun and a badge. And here I go. But I never thought I'd still be doing it 35 years later. But those two calls always stand out. And, of course, there's so many things that, over the years, all the dead bodies, the suicides,
sure,
the times I thought I was going to die. Those things. I'm sure I know they do. They take a toll on you.
Yeah.
But that first day will always stand out, like the McDonald's and a knife. I need to write a book, call it Back of the Knife or something. I don't know.
It's like Bobby Darin's song. It's crazy to think when you're a new cop, you have to be exposed to so many things and you have to grow a skin. It's like you haven't been, it's like when you're super pale in the summer. I'm always pale, and you haven't got any color yet. You know what I mean? You kind of like you kind of have to form this callousness around you when at first all these little calls like that you went to are like, oh, when can I go hands on, or can I talk to him like that? And then after like a couple months of hanging with these guys, you kind of get the feel for it and you kind of know if you can make it. Like, can you keep doing this? You know what I mean? Because
it does wear on you. My son told me a year ago, he said, Dad, I don't think you know what 35 years of police work did to you. And I don't think I did. And because anybody that's in it for a long time, you may grow cold and callous, but it's still done something to your heart.
Yeah.
And I've known hundreds of officers who, they weren't just hard-hearted on the job. They went home and they were hard-hearted. And then they lost their wife and their kids. I was talking to an officer last week whose hardness cost him everything. And what have you. We make these on our website, Steve. You'll notice we make videos of cops who've been through, terrible ordeals and fights and shootouts and who've been shot. And I did one last week, and then the officer told me, he said, I just got so bitter. I just lost everything. Lost my wife, lost my kids. And then he came to Christ like you, and it's a beautiful story. We'll have it up and going here in the next day or two. But that stuff does take a toll on you. You just don't realize. And I've had officers tell me, I had an officer tell me one time, because I had been to the scene of where I was dispatched to check on a sick child. And I just assumed I would get there and find a sick child. But when I got there, I found a murdered child.
Oh my goodness.
And the father standing behind me had murdered her. He beat her. He beat her so bad her internal organs collapsed.
Oh my goodness.
And for the first time in my career, 33 years into it, I said to the chief, I may need to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And I did. But I remember the other officer, the detective that came to the scene, saying, Jimmy, I guess I just kind of have a knack for not letting those things bother me. But I wanted to say to him later, hey, bro, I've known him for a long time. He's a good friend. You've been married 4 times.
Yeah.
You drink a lot, and you eat everything that's not attached to the table. You deal with it in different ways.
Yeah, look at the fruits he's producing, they say, right?
Yeah. And he's a great guy, and I love him. He would take a bullet for me. But it has taken a toll on him. Yeah,
you're right. It always does, even if someone handles it seemingly really well.
Quiet! Oh, I thought I hit mute. Did I not hit mute?
That was excellent.
My family's too loud. Everybody's coming in all of a sudden.
It's fine. Mine just got home from the grocery store. I can hear my kids stomping, and my wife is probably doing her job, going, "Hey."
Well, I hit the mute button. I guess you will have to do some editing.
No,
unless we can take a time out and I can just say, "Be quiet, family."
No, this is it's great. I love little instances like
kids.
that.
I have 6 kids, Steve. Yes.
Good for you. That's great.
Oh yeah.
I got 3.
Yeah. 2 of mine for sale, but anyway.
So Jimmy,
no, they're great. They're great kids.
Can you describe to us the strangest or most bizarre thing you've dealt with in your career?
What kind of surprised me and what didn't surprise me. I grew up in a broken home, so I remember my parents fighting all the time, and so it wasn't like I wasn't used to things I saw. I remember my grandfather beat my grandmother so bad, Steve, that I can still see the blood on the walls.
Oh my goodness!
So I was never not, really surprised by what I saw, but it's amazing of the level of depravity that people can fall to. And I remember dealing with a drunk man one night, and I don't know, you may have to edit this, but I dragged him out of a doghouse because he was having sexual relations with a dog inside a doghouse.
Whoa.
And that night we just saw, how low you can sink.
Yeah.
I remember, things like that. I remember a Pentecostal preacher, not to pick on them. I'm a Baptist, but I remember him cutting the throat of his son and just killing him right outside their house, but I think that incident with, the bestiality, I believe it's called that.
Yeah.
That hit me. I'd only been a cop about 2 or 3 years. We didn't know what to do. We just laughed when we caught him because, wow, Glenn, that was his name, Glenn, you're having relations with a dog. St. Bernard, of all things. I know there's cops that would laugh on the floor at something like that because that's how you deal with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you have to laugh to get through it.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're probably trying to not laugh yourself. But anyway, you worked in LAPD. I'm sure you've seen a thing or two. But that just goes to show you how, the police are constantly seeing these things. Most people who live normal lives, they're not going to encounter that. Even though most people have a secret life, they're looking at it from the inside out as opposed to seeing what they're really like. But when you come across things like that and you see how low people can sink, you tend to. I often tell police officers my favorite Bible verse is John 2:25. It says, Jesus trusted no man. Jesus trusted no man because he knew what was in man. Nobody needed to explain to him what man was like because he knew him.
Yeah.
And he understood. That crowd that called him Messiah one day demanded his death the next. And that's the thing that stuck with me was over the years, I still see Glenn dragging him out of that doghouse and what was going on. And just having often thought about it, wow, people can sink, so low.
Yeah.
And police officers who make terrible mistakes, they didn't start off like that.
Yeah.
Eventually they got so hardened that, that they did some terrible things. And that's something you have to watch out for. I saw a lot of cops do a lot of, and not in my presence or whatever, but all the stories I've read and accumulated over the years.
Sure.
If you're not careful, if you're not guarding that heart, to use the words of King Solomon in Proverbs, if you're not guarding that heart, and that's one of the mistakes I made. I didn't guard my heart as much as I should have. Because all those things you see, those images, they become a photo that's permanently attached to your subconscious. I mean, I'm telling you stories that haven't happened in 40 years. So obviously, the memory is greatly impacted by these things because they're so abnormal.
Isn't it?
So that's
isn't
the
it,
answer to that question. You might not have been prepared for that. But.
No, that was. I always say to all the guests, don't just let it rip, because the point of the podcast is to have gentlemen on and women on that did the job, and to really have people hear. I mean, people who aren't in law enforcement listen to this podcast cannot believe the stories. They can't believe the humanity. It blows their mind, and that's the whole point to foster a better relationship with people, to get an understanding of what these men and women really have to see. I mean, the thing that always is so impressive to me about, I know I have a lot of non-Christian listeners, and they're probably going to be rolling their eyes at me, but the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. And this bestiality you spoke about,
said that. Yeah.
Bestiality, all this other stuff, it's all been done before. It all existed. This is, God knows what's good for us and has told you what he despises. And this was thousands of years ago. So for some reason that comforts me, where I look at the world and people say, it's going to hell. And it's like, it's been going to hell.
It's been going to hell.
It's never stopped.
Well, you think about it, Steve, we had 4 people. And by the way, we know about bestiality too, because the Old Testament, long before Solomon said that, there was it was strictly forbidden to have sexual relations with an animal. So,
I
mean, Moses had already been told, watch out for this. Don't tolerate this.
Yeah.
But when you talk, the world is no worse than it's ever been. We just have more people doing it. I mean, we had 4 people on the face of the earth one time, Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and one of them killed the other.
Right.
Cain. So we had 4 people on the earth one time, and 25% of them killed 25% of them. There is nothing new. There's just more people doing it. We have 7.2 billion people on the earth. When Eisenhower was president, we had 135 million Americans. That's doubled. We have 300, overly doubled. We have 330 million Americans. So we're going to see more because we have, in the 60s, there was a lot of anti-police rhetoric and stuff. And I think it's worse. That is really intensified. But even, oddly enough, though, Steve, most people don't know this, but the number of police officers killed in the last 20 years is only half of what it was in the 1990s. We've cut the number of officers gunned down, shot to death by gunfire, in half. It used to be 100, 125 a year. And last year, in 2020, we lost 346 police officers. Take out the COVID deaths, that was about 186. We would have had one of our best years in 100 years. Now think about that, the best in terms of not losing as many officers. One is too many, but realistically in this job, you're going to lose some officers.
Sure.
But, over half of them, I think the numbers would have been around 130 with about 50 being gunned down. We would have had one of our best years statistically And I'm so hesitant to say that because I'm sure somebody's listening that lost a friend, and I have too. But we would have had a pretty good year. Now we still have about 1,000 officers assaulted every week, about 58,000 a
Sure.
year. But even the murder rate's been cut in half the last 20, 25 years. That hovers around 15,000. Now, in all fairness to stats, that there's a lot of we're able to save people more than we ever have before too. When we got those tourniquets, we had like 7 cops saved in the country. When we started carrying tourniquets, we saved like 7 cops the first week. And I've
Yeah.
had friends who've been saved by tourniquets. So carry those tourniquets.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's easy to believe things that just aren't true, but there's a lot of bad things going on out there, but they've always gone on. You can read some terrible stories. There's 600 wars in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And some unbelievable things that people did to people that are just unreal.
I always say, like, people think I'm crazy to say it that aren't of the faith, but try on a Christian worldview. If you want the world to make sense in all its good and bad, try the Christian worldview, because it does when you look through that lens.
Oh, it does.
It just everything all of a sudden makes sense. I can't describe it, but it's just the truth.
Well, Steve, there's an amazing verse that has been captivating me for 2 years, and I've read the Bible through 500 times, and I study an hour or 2, 3 a day. Psalm 55, verses 9 through 11 says, destructive forces are at work in the city. Fraud and violence and what have you, but that phrase in the New International Version says, destructive forces are at work in the city. And you do see these destructive forces.
Sure, absolutely.
And they're at work. I mean, you remember the night the Dallas cops were killed, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was there. I don't know if I told you that or not, but I went to that protest.
Wow.
You keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So I went downtown to listen to it. My son lived next door to the park where the rally was in a high-rise apartment. So I thought I'm going to go see him. July 7, 2016.
Can you remind me what was that protest about?
Well, an African-American person had been killed in Baton Rouge a few days earlier.
Okay.
So about 1,000 people were protesting in downtown Dallas.
Yep.
Right across the street from around the corner from where Kennedy was killed, back in 63, I believe. And a place where terrible violence has occurred. In January of 1988, an officer made a traffic stop and a homeless man walked up in the same place and took his gun from him, a .44 Magnum, and pointed it at the officer. And the crowd came out of McDonald's and said, shoot the pig, shoot the pig.
Oh, my goodness.
And he shot him. He killed him. John Chase, January of 1988. They lost 5 cops that year, Dallas did. But on July the 7th, 2016, about 1,000 or so protesters were downtown Dallas, and the press called it a peaceful protest. That is a complete lie. It was not peaceful. One of the first speakers was a Caucasian, a white preacher who stood up and quote, you can see it on YouTube. They might have taken it down, but I have it, where he said, may he damn white America. May God damn white America. White America is an effing lie. Dr. Jeff Hood said that to all those people, a white preacher, Baptist preacher.
Wow.
And he had that crowd in a frenzy. And I'll never forget, Steve, at 10 minutes till 8, I'm sitting there in my truck. And I'm sitting there in my truck, couldn't find nowhere to park. I mean, the hate and the anger was thick enough to cut. And at 10 minutes till 8, I heard a thought came to me, as clear as you and I talking now. And it said, there's a lot of anger here. There's fixing to be a shooting. I never had experienced anything like that before. I don't know if I told you about that.
No.
I just thought, oh, no. And I called a Seattle cop friend of mine and told him what was going on. He said, yeah, I'm watching it on TV. I guess they were airing it on TV that night. And I circled the block a few times, and then they started protesting in the streets. I saw those Dallas cops and look on their face. I could still see that one kid standing up against the wall, police officer. And he looked nervous and scared. And, I mean, the stage had been set. It was not the fault that night. I'm not blaming Black Lives Matters or any of the groups. That man was acting on his own. The man that did the killing was so hateful that the Black Panthers kicked him out of their group 10 years earlier for his rhetoric. He was that bad.
That's saying a lot.
But he shot a couple of friends of mine, one named Brian, one named Misty. I'd love to have them get a hold of you. You'd love to talk to them some night, especially Misty. She was one of the 2 females shot that night.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And, it was just an awful thing. And I left, and my son called and said, Dad, where are you? They're shooting the police. It was awful.
Oh, my goodness.
Awful. And it's just, I don't know what to say about that. I just still can't believe it happened, But then again, why am I surprised? I'm really surprised that we don't have that more often. That's the amazing thing about these statistics is that we keep them around 50 dying by gunfire. That's one a week. That's too many, but I'm just stunned that, I think we are going to see some bad things here in the next few weeks after this trial with Minneapolis. That could really be bad.
Yeah, I did did a little research on that because I'm curious about it. The media always gets people, just like this preacher did. He gets people whipped up, and I said this 6 months ago, but he's not going to get convicted of murder. If you look
I didn't know if you want to say that he's not.
No, Minneapolis, the move he did with his knee is approved and taught in their police academy.
Yeah, it is.
So he's following his training. Was he callous? Did they try to comfort this guy? No. Was there a lot of wrong stuff done? Yeah. Did he try to murder him? No. In the autopsy, the final autopsy came back. His throat wasn't crushed. He wasn't suffocated. All these things, they said, I was listening to a podcast and they said, this is how you can tell if your country's turning into a banana republic. If this can go to trial, because these jury members are afraid for their lives. They should be, because they don't know that they'll make it out of this court alive if they don't get the verdict that's wanted by the mob. So,
yeah.
If that kind of pressure affects sentencing, that they said that's when America is truly becoming a banana republic. Because with Darren Wilson in the Michael Brown case, I went back and read all that whole case. That and Obama's Justice Department came in and investigated that and could not find fault with the officer because there was none. And Michael Brown was a criminal who got himself killed. Now, you can't even, and he was one of the people Black Lives Matter was founded on. So you can't breathe that, though, into the ether in any way without some kind of kickback. But these are truths and facts. Now, this outcome of this trial is even more of a pressure cooker than that one. So I'm really afraid for the country for how they're going to react to
Well, I'll
this
tell you,
guy.
Steve, I've been talking to police officers in Minneapolis and troopers and one police chief. And he said, Jimmy, they're going to reduce the charges on Chauvin to manslaughter. And the other three are going to walk.
Yep.
That's his prediction. And he's right up there in it. And, everything looks so bad when you watch that one video camera. And I know it's bad. I was sitting.
Oh, it's so hard to watch. It's terrible.
It is. I mean, I was sitting where George Floyd died just a few weeks ago, Steve, just up in Minneapolis. And I walked in there and just sat down and stared at they've drawn I don't know what it is, an image of an angel or something on the ground where he died. And I just sit there looking at people and, and listening and thinking, wow, this is just gonna, I've told people, there's one cop per 10,000 people up there in the country. You really do need to be thinking in terms of, for your non-police listeners, you need to be thinking in terms of, are you prepared? As Colonel Grossman likes to say, I am my family's Secret Service.
Yeah.
So I'm not a gun fanatic or anything like that. I mean, I'm pro Second Amendment and all that good stuff. I'm Texas, the state on bottom that holds out the other 49. Where I'm at.
Hell yeah.
So you need to be. I hope people are prepared because it's fixing it. And people aren't listening. I've been telling people, I've been encouraging them to, hey, get that self-defense insurance where a lawyer can, come to your rescue.
Sure.
And so you don't have to cough up $30,000. That's what I did. And I even work for them now, and I promote it all the time. I'm not going to promote it here. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you better have everything prepared.
Yeah.
Pepper spray or something, because we had 580 cities protesting and rioting this last time around, but they're going to come in the suburbs. When I say they, I don't mean any particular race, because there's no race confines to this. It's everybody that's just not thinking through and there's so much anger. There's so much anger. And anger is so, anger by itself is not bad. When you allow anger to linger and you just can't get over things.
Yeah, festers in you.
Eventually, it's like Cain. We mentioned Cain killing his brother Abel a while ago. He did not kill him until he was first angry. And God came to him and said, hey, dude, you need to chill out. Sin is knocking at your door. He was mad. His face was downcast. He ignored God's warning. A few days later, using something, he killed his brother.
Yeah.
And who knows what's going to happen. It's amazing that about 50 people, I think, were killed during the last protest around the country. It's amazing that it's not that, 15 times that or whatever, because who knows what's going to happen, especially in Portland and Seattle. That they're just not a thinking public up there. They're just not thinking this thing through at all.
Yeah, and
Too
there's
much anger. Anger blinds you. Anger and hate blinds you.
Jimmy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how can this is like such a tough question to answer. I don't know if anybody can answer it, but maybe you have a thought on how can the public and the police how can the public learn to love the police, or how can they bridge that gap when there's so much propaganda, misinformation happening? Like, it's almost like you really have to want to know the truth and want to look into, you know what I mean? Because this is something I run into all the time, where I have friends and stuff like that are like, are this shy of saying F the police, but not you, Steve, and not your other friend, and not him. You guys are good guys, but the bad police. Yes. And it's like it's almost they're revealing that they know cognitively that doesn't make sense, because they know half a dozen cops that are just good people and have families and aren't out there hunting down people of color. Like, that's insane to think. But they're wrapped up in their ideologies. They can't get rid of them. It's like their identity now. Like it's so frustrating.
Well, as I said earlier, and I try to keep up with stats, Stephen, over 75% of the American public supports the police. But it takes more than putting a sign in your yard that says, "I back the blue." There's a lot of those down here. I personally, wouldn't do that. The signs are not helping, support the blue or anything. It's good to get involved in your local police department. If you're a citizen listening right now, and get involved. When I was in Portland, I saw something really interesting. They, if you go to, I was inside the roll calls of Portland, Steve, and there's food that comes in constantly. I mean, I saw food. I saw signs all over the wall. "We're in your corner. We're praying for you." Especially the churches. I've been disappointed in the church's response. Famous preachers marching down the streets with groups that are Marxist and communist, and I'm like, gee, dude, are you not paying attention? Have you looked into where these groups had their origin or whatever?
Yeah.
And get involved. Get involved with go see the police chief and what have you, and get involved. That's what we have to do, and that's to show that support and what have you, and so forth, and join the Citizens Police Academy. Most departments now have Citizens Police Academies. Yeah. They're on hold because of COVID, a lot of them. But get the citizens involved. I recruited dozens of people in my stint, my assignment I had that worked with that. I was always, getting guys involved in stuff like that. But I tell the churches, especially, because I've just been so disappointed in churches' responses, and whatever. Give them some good things. I had a church, though. I say I'm disappointed a lot. I had a church in Cleveland, Texas, Steve, that they said, "Jimmy, we want to," and I asked them. They said, "Yeah, put us down for that." They gave me $2,500, and I went out and purchased 200 copies of Colonel Grossman's new book on spiritual combat. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I have not, no.
But I put 200 copies of those books in 5 different police departments. I found out how many officers there were. The churches helped pay for it. Just getting in there, praying for them. Why not? I tell churches all the time, why don't you skip this men's breakfast you do on Saturday morning? It's worthless anyway. Why don't you just meet at the police department, gather around the flagpole, and cry out to God on behalf of your officers? Show support. I mean, there's just sit down and say how, because we're not just talking about supporting some guys who are tired, fatigue-stricken. We're talking about guys who are going to protect your family.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about the greeter at Walmart, as important as he is, or the checker at Kroger. We're talking about the guys that are going to be that thin blue line that stands between you and the chaos. You might want to, don't bite the hand that feeds you, as the old saying goes.
Sure.
Get down there and meet with the police chief. Some of you pastors, you ought to be leading the way. What can we do to support the police? And yes, when the police are wrong, when they're corrupt and they cheat, lie, steal, or use excessive force, They forfeit their authority and their badge.
Sure.
Put them in jail. I'm all for that. They're criminals. Get rid of the bad ones. And we're always going to have those there. But that is such a small percentage because those police, even the bad ones, sometimes they come to your rescue. They respond to that call. I hope I answered your question there but I've just been so disappointed. I want to see the churches more involved. They ought to be leading the way in loving these cops. And a lot of churches are.
Absolutely.
But I know I've been in the ministry a long time. Most of them are just trying to keep their own boat afloat and pay for the building they meet in.
I know. Yeah.
I've been in that a long time. That's a whole other show. But
we joined a little church here just 20 minutes down the road. And, at the end of this service, the pastor prayed for leadership in the country. He prayed for public safety, first responders, police, fire. And I said, you know what? I like this church. It's like these are dutiful things we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be praying for stuff like that, praying for leadership.
Well, the Bible says, pray for kings and all that are in authority. And here's what it says next, 1 Timothy 2, Steve. Pray for kings and all that are in authority so that we may lead or live peaceable lives.
Right.
So the peace in the street is connected to the prayers of the saints.
Absolutely.
And, and it's, getting people to come to a prayer meeting is like pulling teeth. They get as excited as they do about that as going to the dentist. But just getting involved in every way you can.
Absolutely.
Reach out to these police chiefs. Say, what do you need from us? Take food down there. Get to know them. Now, some of the departments you take food, they'll thank you, then throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
I did that a lot.
That's so true. Unless it's prepackaged, store-bought, we're like, thank you, we feel really bad, but we're afraid you poisoned.
Bottled water. I took a bunch of bottled water and snacks. Now, we had a police department here that they brought them brownies, and the officers loved it. But as it turned out, they were laced with marijuana, so they were real happy there for about a day or two.
Are you serious?
So be careful about that. But go down there and form a relationship and say, hey, what can we do for you?
Absolutely.
And, get behind it because, we all believe we ought to support the troops. They're over there fighting the longest war in the history of the country. It's still going on since October of 2001. Well, the police are fighting it here. And that's that thin blue line that's standing. And you may be mad at the police. We've made some mistakes. But, hey, and it's amazing, Steve, people point out, look how many people the police have killed or whatever. Doctors kill 250,000 people a year through negligence. 200. And it could be as high as 400,000. Doctors cause 1,000 deaths a day. But nobody thinks we should start a group, Patients' Lives Matter, or should we shut down the physicians and the doctors? Yeah, the police are not going to act with perfection. I told them.
No.
I was a guest on a radio show the other night, and I said, what do you want from the police? What's your expectations? They're not, and they pointed out some things that happened. Yes, that's 4 things. What are the rest of them? And I know there's mistakes, and there's a lot of chiefs right now that are no-nonsense chiefs. They're not going to put up with any, junk from the officers or anything that's out of the, that's, violation of policies and procedures and laws and what have you. But we have some very unrealistic expectations from the police. We hire from the human public. We hire from
that's the problem.
We don't get these guys. You cannot order these guys. You don't go to online and say, I'm going to order a couple of perfect cops. There is no RoboCop, and besides, he was pretty mean too. You don't want him. So
right, I've heard people say before. It's so funny. They're so confused because they haven't done any research. They just listen to the talking heads, and they go, with all these the 6-month background investigation, everything that's looked into for a cop being hired, and they run amok this often. It's like, no, they don't. Actually, if you look at the profession of police and put it against, like you said, all other professions, it's less than 1% run amok. It's actually an extremely good batting average for the responsibility and stress when compared to any other profession. Because of the huge background in psychological and polygraphs, because we are very careful with who we choose, like you said, they're human, so there's still error, but it's a pretty damn good profession that way.
It really is. And, it's we don't have any other choice but to hire, from the human population, or it's people are sinners, as we often say in church, and they're going to make some mistakes. But we in 2019, I believe the police killed 1,004 people. I wish we didn't have to kill anybody, but like 98% of those were justified, and that's. I don't want to make light of that, but there's 330 million people in this country. The police put their hands on 1 million people a month.
Right.
1 million a month.
It's staggering.
You know, 1,000 cops are injured every week. More than that, it's like 58 to 60,000 now. It's amazing. This is what stuns me. It's amazing that there's not more evil and more violence and more shootings. You know, and
oh yeah, there's a comedian that had a joke that he used to go. He said, I got the stats for people murdered in America, and he read it off. I forget how many thousands it was, and he goes, people are really astounded by this. He goes, I feel the opposite. I'm like, that's it? 300 million people, and there's only this many murdered? That's incredible.
Oh, heavens, yeah. We have about 15,000 people murdered a year. Mexico has over 30,000. I mean, it's across the street down here in Texas. They have over 30,000. And we used
that they
to have
report
25 or 30,000. Yeah, who knows? Because a lot of people have gone there. We haven't seen them yet. But it's amazing. And medicine, we are saving more people, too, with tourniquets and medical care and emergency room response. So that's good, too. But and I don't want to make light of people's lives. You know, when I watch a police officer, when I watch a video where I watched one a while ago where an officer, I don't remember where it was, in Nashville, I believe. Did you see that when a real heavy-set police officer got into a shootout with an African-American lady?
Yes, that was bizarre. And, you never think a lady's going to shoot you. You know, you never think that.
Yeah, I didn't see it going there. And, we have been able to take some citizens sometimes that are complaining, saying, hey, why don't you come try out this shooting machine we have?
Yeah, I love that.
Let us show you something.
That's my favorite.
All of a sudden, this guy pulls out an iPhone from his pocket, and he gets shot 2 times. Like, oh, you just killed a guy with an iPhone.
I saw one of those, and the reporter just kept pulling his gun on every traffic stop. And they're like, what are you doing? He's well, it's a traffic stop. They're like, you don't pull your gun out.
Yeah, we don't do that.
It's like,
something. It feeds
like a video game.
Too. I mean, there are those news agencies out there that hate the police, and they hate any kind of talk of law and order. And if there's any chance they have to make people look bad, for some strange reason, humans love to make other humans look bad. We seem to rejoice in that, like, yeah, he's going to get it. Or
you know what?
Come out.
I fight that urge inside me sometimes, where someone screwed up, and I can't wait. I can't wait to tell somebody about it. I'm like, geez, that's really nasty.
But at the same time, you want the truth to win out.
Yeah.
And I understand. I mean, I don't post things like, hey, they put him to death. I wish I'd have been there to push the button, or or fill the needle. I don't say things like that. But again, though, the cry for justice, it's a legit cry, whether it's coming from a group that's been suppressed or oppressed, or from the police. We don't like anything that's. There does need to be a lot of work in the criminal justice system. But the police, they just make the arrest. They don't determine the amount of time.
They deal with the end product. Yeah.
George Floyd, he'd been through the criminal justice system quite a few times, 5 that we know of. And 5 years in prison for robbery. I'm not saying that he deserved what he got that day. I would never say that.
Of course.
I wasn't there, and I don't have any conclusion on that or conclusive statements on that or whatever. But there's going to be those people that live the kind of life that invites trouble. I don't spend time running from the police because I don't live the kind of life that puts them on my tail.
Right.
And that's something, but I'm not sure the other side can accept that right now. I don't think people are right now they're just so angry and so mad that reason and truth are just not, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
I know what I believe. Don't mess my mind up with facts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is, it's so difficult because there was serious systemic racism in the 50s and 40s. Like, it was like, that was, people say it's now. No, America's internationally, we're one of the least racist countries in the world. If you want, there was real racism that set up a lot of groups of people of color to have a hard time in their community. So that's not untrue. So it's just like,
we want to know where to go from here, though. We want to fix some things.
Right. Exactly. It's like,
I hear what you're saying. Like, okay, what do we do? What do we do?
Yeah. It's like, you got to wade through the propaganda. It's hard.
Yeah, Stephen, one of the things we need to do, a friend of mine told me the other day, he has a friend who's really bummed out about all this. So he reached out to the black community. And after one meeting, this is what he said. I tried to talk to my black brothers, but they wouldn't listen. What did you say? Think about what he's saying. This is the time to listen. My chief used to tell me, Jimmy, just remember when you go on a call, if you will learn to listen, half the time people will think that you have solved their problem. So this is a real good time for people. I tell white cops that say, well, I just don't believe all this, Jimmy. Well, listen anyway.
Yeah.
Let people talk. They feel what they feel for a reason. Just let them talk and, give them a sympathetic ear. And you don't have to agree, but it doesn't hurt to listen to people, because there are people of color who've had bad experiences with the police.
Sure.
And at the same time, there are white people who've had bad experiences with the police. I was a cop 35 years. I had bad experiences with my fellow officers sometimes.
Sure.
It's part of living.
Yeah.
And Steve, I want to see the police get better. I want to see them get, we're hiring a generation of cops that if you can't text, you can't talk. And they don't want to talk. They don't want to get out of the car. I guarantee you, almost every time I get out, if I see a cop on the side of the road, he's got a phone to his ear, or I can tell he's texting. I see that all the time. So I would say to my fellow officers, hey, you're going to have to get better at communication and verbal de-escalation.
Make yourself available.
Maybe they were conducting, some police work. Maybe they were calling in a report. I don't want to judge them. But I didn't have that problem the first 20, 25 years of my career. We didn't have phones. You had to talk to people.
Yeah.
And I really encourage officers too. And I was a fanatic about this. I got out and walked. In my city is about 40,000. But when I was a crime prevention officer, Steve, I got out of the car and went to every single house in the city. I would invite them to Crime Watch meetings and help them. I visited, 10,000 houses, every house in the city. I got use of the school buildings from the superintendent, and I held Crime Watch meetings in there. I got out of the car 10, 20, 25 times a day sometimes. When I retired, my police chief looked out at my fellow officers and said, well, now that Jimmy's leaving, are any of you going to start getting out of the car? And one of the guys on our team, if you've noticed it, is Tyrone Dennis, a retired Atlanta cop. He started a group called Clippers and Cops. Clippers and Cops. He got out there in barbershops and businesses. He would start gathering them by the dozens and talking and listening, because, Steve, the police, whether you like it or not, we are the servants of the public.
Sure.
This is not Cuba. This is not North Korea. This is not China or Iran. The police, we are owned by the public. I had a friend one time who came in from getting off work, and he was putting up his tickets he had written. And he waved one of the tickets and said, well, this lady got all ticked off at me. I don't know who she thinks she is. She don't sign my check. And I said, excuse me, bro, she does sign your check. And everybody said, yeah, Jimmy's right. The public. If you work for a city of 40,000, you got 40,000 signatures on that check. You might want to look at that small print next time you get paid. The public owns us. And that's what comes with, you're a servant. You can't approach this thing like everybody's got to listen to you. And, I watched so many videos where I wish the police, could you just back off? I watched one the other day where an officer pulls over a kid for running a stop sign. She doesn't catch up to him until he's in his driveway. And she wants to know, and she says repeatedly, I want to know if you're on probation or parole. And he's like, what does that have to do with it? You pulled me over for running a stop sign. Mama comes out and says, why are you asking him that? Give him a ticket, let him go, or let him go. And the officer, nope, I want to know if he's on probation or parole. And she escalated that situation until it blew up.
Yeah.
And I have watched, let it go. You pulled him over for running a stop sign. Give him the ticket or give him a warning and get out of there. I watched this 1,000 times in my career, Steve. I'm sure you have too. Don't let your ego get in the way.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a delicate.
You'll stay out of the chief's office. You don't want to have a permanent chair in the chief's office.
Right.
You don't want that.
Agreed.
Just take it. You don't have to let them hit you. I'm not talking about that. That's against the law. But, man, if they want to argue whatever, okay. See you later, bud. Kill them with kindness, we used to say in the police academy in Oklahoma. Kill them with kindness. Yep. All right, sir, have a good day. Well, you sorry, pig. All right, have a good day. Oink, oink.
God bless. But the number one thing we don't want to hear on calls or on the street is, I pay your salary. From the public. That's the number one. That is.
Nobody had said that to him. I said it to him. Hey,
no, I know.
Does sign your check.
Well, they
People
do.
are going to argue. Nobody's happy about getting a ticket.
No.
Who's supposed to be happy? I've gotten one ticket in the last 40 years, and I pulled over the side of the road and pouted for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
'Cause
No
I didn't
one.
want to cough up.
We're
They're
cops.
expensive. They cost a lot of money.
Cops are the hall monitors. No one likes to be corrected, and we're not. We're not any different. When I'm driving and I'm off duty, and I'm in a different jurisdiction, or there's a state trooper driving behind me, I'm not like, oh look, the police, let me wave. I'm like, is this guy gonna pull me over? Like I'm not like thinking positive things about him. I'm like, come on, don't hassle me.
And if it's a trooper that pulls you over, he's not even going to talk to you anyway. He's just going to give you a ticket.
Right.
In Texas, they won't talk. I kid them all the time. I got a lot of trooper friends. Why don't you guys talk? Well, that's why we never get complained on. We didn't pull you over for a conversation. We pulled you over to
our troopers
driving behavior.
Is the state police Texas Rangers? Is that the same thing?
No. The Texas Rangers are about 100 guys that are the elite. I mean, they're just
investigators.
If we could put a couple of Texas Rangers in a box and mail them to Seattle, we would have no problems within 5 days.
So do they do patrol functions? They go out and patrol, or they investigative?
Oh, no, not Texas Rangers. They do what you saw Chuck Norris do. As goofy as
that
show
it.
was.
Yeah.
As goofy as that show was.
So they were doing head kicks with like tight Wranglers on.
Yeah, that's a Texas trooper. I mean, they're just highly trained. They're like the FBI times 2.
There's
cool. Only about 100 of them. You got to be really special to be one. And the troopers are highway patrol. They're going to do drugs and any other crime they see, but mainly they're out there for traffic enforcement.
Gotcha.
That's the way it goes in Texas. I don't remember how many. I think there's 1,500 troopers in Texas and probably 100 Rangers. Maybe 99 now since Chuck Norris quit.
Buddy of mine was going through Texas probably 10 years ago, and he got pulled over by a trooper. And the guy goes, first of all, he called him boy. He's like, you're a long way from home, boy. My buddy was like, I'm getting a ticket. And he gave him a ticket, and he goes, he didn't have, in Massachusetts, they stamp our insurance stamp on the registration, so we don't have to carry an insurance card.
Yeah, we got away from that, yeah.
So he goes, I have my insurance stamped on the registration, and he's like, well, it don't matter down here. That's not how we do things. But
it's a mess. And the only way to get good at all those things, Steve, is for officers. I tell them all the time. Colonel Grossman always likes to say, men do not rise to the occasion; they sink to the level of their training.
Yeah, that's a good saying.
Men don't rise to the occasion; they sink to the level of their training. We had a terrible shooting at a church here 3 years ago. Remember down in Sutherland Springs, a man goes in there and shoots 46, kills 26.
Yep.
And I've become friends with that church. And one of my friends named Stephen Williford, if you remember, he's the one who ran out of his house with his AR-15. He shot that guy 6 times.
Yeah, we talked about it on the podcast.
Oh, did you? Well,
yes.
Stephen's a good friend. If you ever want to have him on the show, I'll be glad to
cool.
set him up. We talk all the time. And but Stephen wasn't just some old country boy who happened to own AR. He was an NRA instructor. He practiced all the time. He was prepared. Nobody in that town could have done what Stephen done. And the same truth applies. The same principle applies to the police. To get good at anything, when you can use force, holding people, detaining them, verbal de-escalation, this is something you have to practice a lot. Yeah. I have a friend, I bet you've heard of him. His name is Greg Stevens. He dry fired 1,000 times a month. He went to the range at his own expense often. And then one day he was working a part-time job, and he had to make a withdrawal on all of those hours of training. If you recall, 2 terrorists showed up at a convention center in Garland, Texas, and Greg killed them both. Do you recall the killing of the 2 ISIS terrorists in Garland, Texas?
Was that for the drawing of Mohammed?
Mohammed, the drawing. Greg is my good friend.
Wow.
That's another friend. I got to put you. Greg's on our team, by the way, that we're going to take around the country.
You know all these patriots.
I know everybody. I was talking to Donald Trump a while ago before I was talking to you, but not really.
I was like, what?
I'm kidding. But Greg, I go out and recruit these guys because the first time I tracked Greg down, he did that in May of 2015, the Draw the Prophet contest. He took those terrorists out in less than 15 seconds. But Greg will tell you, he was a 59-year-old traffic cop. I mean, I often joke with him like, gee, what were you doing there? Don't you live in a nursing home? I mean, what were you doing there? Part-time job. Guy dry fires 1,000 times or more a month, pays for his own bullets often. He trained for 36 years, and then one day his number got called. And that's true for all of the different facets of police work. You need to practice verbal de-escalation. Practice it with your spouse. You know, a lot of cops have horrible marriages. That
Yeah.
divorce rate is around 50%. If you talk bad to your wife all the time, you're not going to go to work and talk good to, people on the street. You're
Right.
gonna take out your anger on the public that you're mad at your wife or your husband, as the case may be, if you're a female police officer. So that's what Greg did, and this is what Greg said the first time I talked to him. I'll never forget it. I said, Greg, tell me what happened. He said, well, long story short, Steve, he just said, Jimmy, my training kicked in and I knew I had to become the aggressor and take the fight to them. And that's what he did. And I said, man, say that again. I mean, I fell in love with him right then. I would have married that guy right then. I told him later. Is that your vacuum cleaner or mine?
That's I have, this happens repeatedly. It's my water. We have a well. It's my water pump. I'm in the basement right next to the friggin' thing.
Oh, you don't have any water in Massachusetts or wherever you're at. I don't remember.
I'm out in the country, so we have our own well. So we have a pump that pumps it up into the house. I wish I could shut it off.
I just figured my kids were playing with a vacuum cleaner. I just said, no, I'm not doing that. I got 4 grandkids.
Oh, I love it. Grandkids are a blessing. That's amazing. Jimmy, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying moment on the job?
I kind of touched on, I had so many. I pull my gun once a week. But I guess, looking back, the call that really shook me more than I realized was when I got dispatched to that little girl. I think I touched on it a while ago.
Yeah.
May of 2013. I was a supervisor that day. I responded to the call. I thought it was just a sick call. And I got there, and I don't know that this fits in with terrifying.
Oh, it would terrify me. Brutal.
But the father met me at the bottom of the stairs. He looked kind of dazed, and I didn't really know what was going on. I thought it was an ambush at first. So that was passing through my mind. So he walks me up the stairs. He's real calm. He's not talking. He walks me into this dirty apartment and down the hall and into this bedroom, the first bedroom on the left. And there's this beautiful little girl. Her name was Anastasia, wearing a white dress, kind of a dirty white dress with blood on her shirt. And I just assumed, for whatever reason, that she was choking.
Sure.
So I knelt down. I just thought she was choking, even though she was not moving. But I just got on the ground with her, and about that time, a paramedic showed up, and I was fixing to start CPR, and he said, Jimmy, she's dead. And my first thought was, no, she's not dead. Children don't die.
Yeah.
That ran through my mind, with lightning speed. And
sure.
So, no, she's dead. And I just assumed she had choked or something. But we would know within an hour or two that the father standing behind me had beaten her so bad and so often that her internal organs just collapsed. And she died. I remember a neighbor telling the detective that she often saw her at the window, just staring out the window. And she would ask her, "Are you okay?" And she would say no. And, I guess what gets every cop more than anything is a hurt child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, I remember August 23rd, 1986. I was on my way to fill up my police car, go in for the day, and I was dispatched to a call of a child in a dumpster, dead child. I thought it was a mistake. I whipped a U-turn. I went to that dumpster, and there's that kid in that dumpster. And the babysitter got mad at her the night before and killed her and dumped her in a dumpster. And I remember the date because that's my wedding. That was my 9th wedding anniversary, and I was going to take my wife out that night. But I had 3 kids at the time, and I said, no, we're not leaving the kids. So we all went out and celebrated our 9th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
My little kids that were 5 or 6, 7 years old and whatever. But I think those 2 calls have always stood out. I don't, and I thought about this a lot since we had talked about email, but I was real fortunate that, terrifying calls and stuff. I just, I'm not sure I ever had anything that bothered me more than those 2 little girls.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Stayed with me, and obviously here it is almost 40 years later, and it still bothers me. What bothered me about Anastasia, the little girl that was beaten to death by her father, the sick child call, was my granddaughter was about the same age. So for a couple of days there, it was like I would see my granddaughter, Lily, I would see her face on the body of Anastasia.
Yeah.
And I began to have some trouble at work after that. That's why I would say to my fellow officers, if you think you can just sweep that under the carpet and not talk to anybody, and then act like some kind of dirty Harry, some kind of macho guy,
Yeah.
you're making a mistake. I went to my chief and said, I think I need to go talk to somebody. I'm not sure about this. I don't know what that's done. And there's nothing, I try to say this to cops, Steve. I don't know if they listen. There is nothing good about you trying to act like nothing bothers you. That is not, in this day and time, you're not impressing anybody. You're worrying people.
Yeah.
What do you mean that doesn't bother you? Do you not have red blood in your veins, no heartbeat? Sure, it ought to bother you.
Yeah.
But
yeah, those are
what saved me in my career is I wore my heart on my sleeve. I wept. I cried every week for 35 years. If something was bad, I pulled off somewhere and found a quiet spot, got out of the car and poured my heart out. And there's healing in tears.
Sure.
I know it's not coppish. You're not supposed to admit that, but I didn't care. The quicker I got to a place where I didn't care what others thought, I'm just going to pour my heart out here and weep. Fill them out. King David said in Psalms, "You've stored my tears in a bottle." I'm sure I've got a few bottles. My wife says I'm half woman. I'm half woman. That's why I cry all the time. But I just, that's just the way I was, and that helped me.
Yeah.
Because when you cry, there's pain in those tears, and when the tears come out, so is the pain.
Absolutely.
And you'll do better. There's nothing macho or heroic about keeping all of that in.
No, I agree. That's the number one call, Jimmy. I am terrified of a call like that because I've heard that from so many different officers. I haven't, I've had like choking and distressed children and stuff like that, but nothing super disturbing. And I was a natural resource officer at the beginning of my career, and like a local game warden.
You were what now?
Natural resource officer.
Oh, for schools.
No, natural resources, like a local game warden.
Oh, of course, the game, yeah.
Yeah, so I came on the department and a guy had just left. Well, they had just had a drowning, and I was 22, so at that point, nothing seems to bother you, but or you don't know anything bothers you. And the guy that had left, they had just pulled a child from a local pond, and the kid was like the same age as his son. So what I heard was from the director of the department, he said he was having some major issues because his son, same hair color, everything, looked like the kid that he pulled out of the water. And he found himself every single night sitting and watching his son sleep. He couldn't stop. And it, like, when I think about that, that is so upsetting to me. Like that.
Oh yeah.
And he's going to live with
stories like that out there.
He's just going to have to live with it. And of course he got over it, and he had a successful career in law enforcement after that. Elsewhere, actually, I think he moved down to North Carolina, became a deputy sheriff. But that just that guy's story sunk in with me. And then as soon as I became a dad, I remembered it and said, "Oh my goodness, now I totally understand." Like that is.
Oh yeah.
That is brutal.
Well, Steve, do you know what the shortest verse in all the Bible is?
I don't.
John chapter 11, verse 35. I quote, "Jesus wept." He was at the graveside of Lazarus, his best friend. The Bible says he loved Lazarus. They had a special relationship. They were best friends. And his two sisters, Martha and Mary. But I love the fact that God takes the time to put this short verse in the Bible. A total of 3 syllables. Jesus wept. I mean, it broke his heart. Even though he was going to raise him from the dead, he was identifying with that grief. And at the same time, Jesus was a crier. And he made the world, so that's pretty strong.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's just nothing, and I see this in cops, and I've said this to cops before. How long are you going to wear this facade so we can get on with real life here? How long are you going to act like stuff doesn't bother you?
Yeah.
Because in TV, I got into police work. I got into police work, Steve, because I got hooked on those Dirty Harry movies back in the late 70s. And every night at 11 o'clock on CBS, a police show came on. T.J. Hooker, Police Story, Beretta, Columbo, and Starsky and Hutch.
Oh, my goodness. What a lineup.
And I know, in the 70s, it was called CBS Late Night. You can Google it, and it will tell you what night, each night what show came on.
Yeah.
I watched those shows so much, And then I started watching that Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood. I mean, I wanted a 44 Magnum more than I wanted to eat.
Yeah.
Still don't have one. And we could carry any gun we wanted to. We had one cop who, David Goldstein, carried a 44 Magnum. I wanted to so bad. But that is all, and officers, that is all scripted. I loved Adam 12. I loved them all.
Yep.
But that is scripted. And life is not like that. And you're really doing yourself a lot of harm, certainly no favor, if you're seeing a lot, going through a lot, and you're not reaching out. And this is one of the problems with cops. I had one tell me last week, a 35-year veteran, he said, we are so proud and we're so arrogant. And that refusal to admit, man, I need some help. You know, I need some help. And it's very hard for cops to do that sometimes. But, and then some departments, one of the biggest departments in the state of Texas, one of the biggest, I'll tell you off the air, I don't want to put them on the spot. One of their officers, 15-year veteran, told me the other day that every day of the week, 3 times he told me this, every day of the week a cop comes to work and asks for help. So that's good for them. And that also tells you, we may be hiring a lot of people that don't have that stamina that's needed to be a police officer. Because we are reporting shortages all over the nation in unprecedented ways.
Yeah.
We're thousands of cops short. Dallas PD is 1,000 police officers short.
Wow.
That's a lot of cops.
How many are they total? 5? 4 or 5?
Well, Dallas police is, they're built for 3,500 police officers. They've got about 2,500.
Wow.
Well, I think it's 3,600 cops is how many they need. But they have 2,600. But so many are leaving that the Fort Worth Police Department created a special academy just for Dallas cops who want to come to work over there. And those two cities are, you can ride a bike. I mean, they're 30 miles apart.
Yeah.
So, and Dallas doesn't support its officers, the council and some of the other citizens.
Yeah.
And what have you. And, it's just it's been a mess over there for years. And they know it.
Oh,
it's just a rough place to work,
Jimmy, we have a lot of listeners that are young officers or people, candidates that are in the process. Could you impart some advice for them getting into the field?
Yes. I tell you what I would say to every officer. Here's where I messed up. And if you'll take the time, and this is not a punch from my website, but if you'll go to my website, on the front page, bluelifesupport.com, and there's a little tab halfway down that says, if I had it to do over, I would do this. And it's a 15-minute clip. Oh, there you go. And that's what I used to look like. See how pretty I used to be there, as you can see, like 400 years ago. But about halfway down, you can click on a clip or a page. It'll take you. You can watch the if I had a do-over. Here is something that my daddy told me one time, Steve. He said, son, you need to learn to play poker. I said, Dad, what does that mean? He said, you've got to learn to play the hand dealt you, because life is 5% happening and 95% reacting. 5% happening and 95% reacting. Thus the analogy of playing poker. Learn to play the hand dealt you. One of the mistakes I made in my career is that when something happened I didn't like, I would play the victim, or I would pout, and I would start using that infamous word called they. They are out to get us.
Right.
They don't like us. And all of that stuff, when you talk like that and think like that, it gets in your system and it contaminates you. I mean, it messes with your mind. So I encourage officers everywhere, listen, don't surrender your attitude. Stay focused. Don't be unrealistic in your expectations. You're going to work for departments where the leaders, the mayor, the council, the chief, they're going to throw you under the bus, like we see in Portland, and Seattle, and Chicago. There's terrible leadership there. Well, the answer to that is not to complain, gripe, and call them names. That just makes you and turns you into a bitter person that your spouse doesn't want to be around, that you may end up divorcing, because all that stuff creates a lot of pain. And I've seen a lot of officers who became so miserable at what was happening inside the PD or on the street, and it created a discomfort of pain, and then they started drinking, or they started doing drugs, or they started committing crimes, or, and I saw this 1,000 times, they started sleeping around, looking for something to make them feel good.
Sure.
And what I did, Steve, years ago, I studied the works of Dr. Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
I'm not.
But he was a Jewish Holocaust survivor. And he, Hitler comes in there and takes him out of his country, puts him in prison, kills all his family. And every day, he was in Auschwitz, every day he's watching his family be killed or his friends be killed. But anyway, long story short, here's the quote that I read by him one time. I think I memorized it on the spot. He said, every freedom known to man can be taken from him except the last of the human freedoms. And that freedom is the right and the freedom to choose your own attitude in any given set of circumstances. And I love that. Every freedom you've got can be taken from you. But you can still say, hey, you can take my attitude, take my cash, my car, my houses, whatever. You ain't taking my attitude. I'm going to be happy. I'm alive. My heart beats. My lung breathes. I got a family. Don't make police work your life. On your days off, don't go to the PD. I don't know how many times I saw cops coming to the PD on their days off. My gosh, if you're married, go be with your wife or your husband or your children. Go check on your parents. Don't let police work in your blood. If you do, you'll always find something that upsets you. You know, Steve, most people don't know this, but most of the stress in the life of a police officer is not from the street. It's from the police department and the politics. And running a close second, if not tied, is the trouble they have at home. Now, the public thinks we're all stressed out over the protesters. Nah, that's kind of fun. Some guys like going to all that stuff. What gets them is the stuff inside the PD. The police chief doesn't keep his word. He throws you under the bus. All the stories I could tell, which I'm sure you could too. That's what bothers. I heard a chaplain say one time, he researched it, 85% of stress in the life of a cop comes from the administration. Well,
my goodness.
You can complain about that. You can be mad or say, I'm going to stay focused. And what helped me do that, and I failed often, but what helped me do that was being like what we talked about earlier. I was a man of faith. Jesus was just so real to me that I knew that no matter what happened or what the chief did or the sergeant did or the public did, he was still with me. And he just kind of, I fell a lot. I fell a whole lot, but I always, with no exception, got back up. So I would say to fellow officers, if you're starting now, hey, you're enjoying it right now, but there's going to come a day that you're going to sound like some burned out old victim. You don't have to be. If you'll hold on to your attitude, don't surrender it. And if you're a family man, be devoted to that family. Don't be unfaithful to your wife. Spend time with the kids. Steve, one time a police officer told me, we were both filling up our police cars with gas. He pulled up and said, well, Jimmy, my wife is divorcing me. I said, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, she's moving to North Carolina and I'm moving to Los Angeles. I get to see my kid 2 weeks in the summer. I got a pretty good deal. Excuse me?
Oh,
Your kid is moving 3,000 miles away. I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's going west to L.A. She's going east to North Carolina. 14 days a year, he's going to raise that kid who's going to be so angry that his father abandoned him, because that was a case of child abandonment. Well, I had to go to L.A. to be to be a cop out there. No, you said you committed to your wife and you committed to your child. That's puzzles brutal. Me. I've seen cops, fight to the brink for women who were domestic violence victims. Take that man to jail, get her into a place that's safe and the kids, and yet not put that same effort into the saving of your own marriage. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Or your children? How many cops have made bad fathers? And that's what I'm trying to fix right now in my life. I wasn't a terrible father. I had my issues. I struggled with anger and other things. But will it really matter? Because I'll tell you this, young officers, if you retire on a Tuesday, by Thursday, 2 days later, they will forget you ever worked there. I don't care if you were there 50 years. Everybody below you is either waiting for you to quit, retire or get fired. So they move up.
You are replaceable.
You are replaceable. I used to tell my chief, why do I have to wear this bulletproof vest? What do you mean? Well, the only place I need is inside the PD, chief. Jimmy, get out of here. Because they're waiting for you to quit. They don't care. There ain't nobody going to miss you. They'll talk about you for a week or two. You're out of there. But your kids will remember you.
Yeah.
And if you have children, if you have sons and daughters, invest in them. Spend time with them. And I would share this too if I could, Steve. Don't get in over your head financially. If you make $50,000 a year, you cannot live like Bill Gates.
Yeah.
You cannot have a jet. You cannot own Microsoft and a bunch of cars and jets. You need to live within your means. I know a ton of police officers who are stressed out to the max. And when you research it, it's not protesters on the street. It's credit cards they've run up. They drive trucks they can't afford, live in houses they can't afford.
Yep.
And you got to get out of that. As a matter of fact, on our website, Steve, we have a page called financialcop.com. He's a Texas police officer that was in debt $82,000. $80,000. He got out of debt in 2 years. And he's an expert. He's helped 10,000 cops get it together. I don't make a dime saying that. Get there to our website and get to that site and get you and the wife out of debt. If you have to drive an old beat up whatever, hey, I drove a car.
Do what you have to do.
Do what you have to do. I drove a car one time that was a 1970 Plymouth Grand Fury, and the officers laughed at me. And that thing backfired. My wife took me to work one day and let me out. It backfired, and the SWAT team was at the back door. I almost got shot. But hey, I didn't know anything on it. You know, I makes me just want to go love on her right now, man. I had a great wife. My wife is a police chaplain. I'm like, gee, I was a cop 35 years. How come you never helped me out? But now she's up there all the time. She did help me out. I would, if it wasn't for her. You know, the Bible says if you find a wife, you find a good thing and obtain favor from God. We got married. I mean, it can work. My wife and I got married at 19 years old.
Wow.
I'm 63.
That's great.
Our whole police career, we stayed together. And she was a much better wife than I was husband, but it doesn't have to be bad. So don't surrender your attitude. Watch your money and love your family, you know, and
good
and
words.
God bless you. And just be careful. Watch your back.
I love it.
My FTO told me one time, Steve, he said, rookie, what's your job? And this, I guess, my greatest advice. What's your job, rookie? And I said, sir, I enforce the law and keep the peace. He said, wrong. You keep the peace. If you enforce the law, you'll get in trouble. So learn to overlook a lot, I guess, is what he was saying.
That's funny. That's awesome. Well, those are definitely words of wisdom, Jimmy. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
What a privilege.
Such a fun interview. Where can people support Blue Life Support? I have it up on the screen right now, the CorneliusProject.com.
Oh, yeah. Well, just go to the website, bluelifesupport.com. If you want to donate, can I ask that? If you want to donate
of course.
To the ministry, I raised a few $1,000s the other day and went on a mission trip around the country encouraging police officers in Denver, Portland, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Chicago. We can do that. We don't have any paid staff, but we can, if you want to get some books, we can get books at a very good price for police officers, even books they can listen to. But there's a donate page there. Or what would really help if you really want to help the cops in terms of the gospel and bringing them peace and whatever, go to the donate page and download one page of our business cards. Go to FedEx Printing or whatever, print off a bunch of them and take them down to the local police department. And I'll put your stuff on my site too, because Steve, you're a great podcast. I want people to know what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy.
Now, Massachusetts, is that part of the United States, or I don't even know?
I don't. It's the People's Republic of Massachusetts. A long time ago, John Adams and Samuel Adams were here, and Paul Revere.
John F. Kennedy.
And it was a pretty great little area, but it's touch and go now.
Changing too.
It's no Texas.
Texas is changing too. We're changing. There's a lot of change going on. Austin is contaminating the rest of the state.
I know. It's turning blue from the inside out.
The country is changing.
Yeah, it truly is.
And but maybe they'll come around. Who knows?
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much. I'm going to put all your links in the show notes and on our website. I'm going to close up the podcast here, but you just hang out for a moment. I'll chat with you after.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, guys, thank you for tuning in. That was such a fun episode with James Meeks, 35 years in policing, and he's doing great things now. And he's a pastor, which is just so cool. I really enjoyed that interview. It was so fun. I want to take a moment to have roll call and thank our monthly subscribers. You guys are so generous, and without you, I would be paying for podcast expenses on my own and doing this totally for free, which, I would still do, but I'm so grateful for this. And if you want to become a monthly subscriber or supporter, or if you just want to do a one-time donation to the podcast, you can go to thingspleasesee.com, scroll down and donate. Or if you want to be a guest on the show, thingspleasesee.com, scroll down to be a guest and fill out the little quick form, and I'd love to have you on. And if you don't want to go on, but you know someone, same procedure. Just let me know. So roll call, a big thank you to William James Long of William James Long Investigations, Timothy Wright, the great David Diaz, Scott O'Donnell, Richard Wilson, the magnificent Gary Steiner, Samantha Harper, Sasha Varanoff, Rich Emery, Carmen East, Amanda Powell, Jacob Ruth. Thank you so much for all your support, and thank you for people who do one-off donations and who buy merch on the website and keep it going. It's really great, and thank you for all the downloads. If you haven't done it yet, if you go to iTunes and just give us a 5-star rating, that would be fantastic. That helps the show get eyes on it. So that's the show for this week, and I'll see you guys soon.